Hi, Dan. There
Can
you
you hear me
are.
now?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. How's it going?
pretty good. I'd like to sit down and have lunch with you sometime.
We should do that.
Yeah,
I'm going to be in Scotland for a couple of weeks next month, but I'm not leaving until the 14th.
yeah, we're gonna be doing some traveling too, so yeah.
Where are you headed to?
Well, we're going down through the Southwest, going down to Phoenix and then maybe some other Santa Fe. I'm not sure yet.
Nice, nice.
Catch up.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Sue.
Hi.
I just sent to you board members, I just sent some things out this afternoon, and then I just got something from Mary Giannini that I just sent out about 10 minutes ago. So everything's in motion. Hi, Doug. Hi, Dan. We have, let's see. I'll wait a little bit longer before I try to reach other people, because we've got a lot to do, so we don't want to be delayed.
Yes, it's my night to fix dinner for the ladies.
I think you should pass them a bottle of wine.
Well, I think that's being passed.
Already in motion, huh? Okay, let's see, who are we missing? Justin and Dick. Are you hearing me okay? It looks like I've got a delay in my screen.
I am.
It sounds good.
Okay. Okay, let's see, can somebody, hi, Lynn, can somebody contact Justin, reach out to Justin, I'll reach out to Dick.
I'll see if I have Justin's number.
Yeah, I've got it. I'll tell him.
Okay, good.
I'm not seeing anything that you sent from Mary Giannini. What was it regarding?
The endowment team, I believe.
Oh, I do. So I do have a couple of endowment team things. One from Karen Steele
Mm.
and another one from Karen.
Yeah, the one, they came from Karen and I was forwarding them.
Okay.
All right.
Justin will be right on.
Okay, well, we have a majority, we have a quorum here, so let's get started. And I'll call a meeting to order, and it is 4 o'clock. I'm going to record this so that on my phone, so I'll have things, have reference to go by later. Okay, the first item on the agenda is to approve or amend the agenda. Are there any corrections, additions? Hi, Dick. See you. Okay, then without any objection, the agenda is approved as was circulated. And the next one is to amend or approve the minutes, which were circulated to the trustees.
Move to approve.
Okay, there being no objections, so we'll just go ahead and approve those. The minutes are approved, and we'll move to the next item, which is the April meeting. There was a request from Doug that we move the executive committee meeting to 1:30 PM, and it was okay with me and Doug, obviously. So then the board meeting would be on April 23rd and the exec committee on April 16th. Is there any objection to moving it to 1:30? It would only affect Doug and me and whoever the floating trustee is.
And only the executive committee meeting, not the board meeting.
True. Okay, we will do that, and actually it was requested that this occur for April, May, and June, because those were your travel times, Doug.
Right, yeah, if that's okay.
Okay, so then we need now a floating board member for the next executive committee meeting. We have a volunteer. I see that Luba has volunteered. So let's do that. And you're okay with the 1:30 in the afternoon, Luba? You're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay with 1:30.
Okay. So just on our standard agenda is the minister's report, and Todd is on sabbatical, so we will take a pass on that, but I just want to keep it on there as part of the boilerplate. The next is updates from me, and there were several items. Very briefly, very close to agreeing on the programming and the wording for the uh, public service announcements for KYRS. The contract, which would have to be signed by Rebecca, is actually in the works. So that will happen pretty soon, and I'll put a kind of a informational thing in the Sun to let people know what programs they are, what time they are, and that sort of thing. Any questions about that?
No,
Okay, we don't have anybody that's volunteered or stepped forward to be a church treasurer. However, later in the meeting, under new business, an idea for approaching that in a slightly different manner has arisen, and we'll discuss that later. Then the annual deadlines for the annual meeting, I circulated that. They include the date of the 25th of May, which would be the 14-day deadline that is required by our bylaws. And we'll hopefully be able to have stuff all in order and actually circulate that agenda, that notice with the agenda and with the attachments prior to that. April 27th is the last date for receipt by the board of any member-sponsored bylaw amendments. And that same date, April 27th, is also the last date for receipt by the board of any member-sponsored resolution or motion for the annual meeting. and it has to be from a recognized a team or a committee recognized by the ops team. That's the way that policy number 5 read. And as you will remember, we do have that resolution on apartheid-free congregation that came from the Social Justice Coordinating Council. Any questions about that kind of thing? Okay, the Income Enhancement Plan Subcommittee, the idea of that was to try to find some folks that would work on that, and we had put it off until we had actually candidates or nominees for the vacant trustee positions, and that just occurred within the last day that we have those nominees. So there really hasn't been any action on the part of trying to establish a subcommittee for income enhancement. The next one is the endowment team. There are some of the documents that you got very recently, as a matter of fact, that were forwarded. It came from Karen Dorn Steele, and that was information about them having changed slightly the amount of the funds that would be provided. There was some confusion. To summarize it, they increased the amount for the 2020-25 fiscal year from the year before, but the foundation in Seattle didn't recognize that, so they shorted us. So they're with the endowment teams in the process of making sure that we get that money in after the fact, so to speak, but it will be that. And then they also they voted to raise their contribution for the coming year 25-26 by $1,500 to a total of $35,100. And that was sent to Rebecca to coordinate with the budget. And I think that's the amount that was used in the budget summary. So we're probably on board with that. And we won't know whether we need a second budget summit until we have the generosity drive and see how much money we actually raised. And if we're going to have a shortfall, then we'll have to figure out how to adjust the budget. But that is that item. Is there anything I could clarify about that or any questions? Okay.
Let's see, when's the generosity drive going to be scheduled? Or what's the schedule on that?
It's
It will
pretty,
kick off on April 6th.
yeah, it's pretty much at the month of April, but the kickoff luncheon, as Luba said, is April 6th.
Mhm.
Do you have anything, Lynn, to add to that since you are involved at all?
Well,
with
month
that?
of April.
Oh, no, unfortunately, I was in Issaquah at that meeting and I missed it. First one I ever missed, so. But I have reviewed it and that seems to be the number that they came up with.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I thought you said Lynn.
Oh, I did.
Oh, okay. It's the month of April, the whole month of April.
Mhm.
Okay. The other, the other thing.
I was just noticing another thing on the
Yeah.
endowment issue on the thing that Rebecca put together on revenues. She had an anticipated budget revenues from the endowment 25-26 is 42,000. But it looks like we're looking at 35,000. Is that right?
No,
Or not?
Well, what the endowment team decided on, according to what I got from the team, was $35,100. And they had discovered that $42,000 glitch, and the budget summit proposal actually dealt with less than that, or whether, I can't remember exactly what it was.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Make sure that's been clarified, yeah.
yeah, that's
But
it. Everybody involved is working on that. So,
Okay.
it
okay,
ended up, the number that you mentioned, Tom, that 38. The 38 rather than 40 some thousand is what it ended up as.
35,
35,100.
42,000 was still in the thing that Rebecca last passed out for the budget hearing. So I just want to make sure that had been worked on.
It had been worked on, and the amount of money that is coming, and they may have to adjust the budget, and that's what we'll hear from later on, but that's not our board's thing to deal with. That's
Okay.
kind of minutia. That.
That's a $7,000 change. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So then the other thing that I wanted to have on the record, in the last meeting that Todd attended, which was the January meeting, the board voted to have Todd deal with the request that came in an open letter to the church asking for whether someone could take their own life under the Death with Dignity Act in our church. And the board, after discussion in which Todd was present, voted to pass that responsibility to the senior minister, to Todd. And Todd asked if we could get contacts for Rob Niels, and we didn't have one. And I got a hold of him in February and got an email and a phone number. Since Todd was unavailable during his study month, I passed them to Rebecca and asked her to feed them to Todd when she felt it was appropriate to feed them to Todd. So I just wanted in the record that I had accomplished what I was asked to do by way of coming up with contacts for Rob.
But there's no resolution we can talk about.
It's done.
Can we know as a board what was decided?
Well, Todd expressed his opinion that he didn't believe it was appropriate. I assume that would be the message, but I don't know. I haven't heard directly from Todd, so I don't have an answer to that.
Okay.
Then I don't have anything else other than there will be some discussion later on about this issue of whether or not there should be a statement added to the generosity form having to do with a pledge that may be unpaid when someone passes away during the fiscal year. So we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that later. So then the next team, there aren't any team reports other than the secretary. And I think that you told me, Cindy, you had a verbal report that you just would share with us. Oh, wait a minute, I see a hand from Dan. Dan, what's up?
Could I make a quick aesthetics team report?
Yes, it would be good if you'd follow that up with writing so that it could be attached to the minutes. But yes, give us a verbal.
I'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, please do.
This aesthetics team, we had planned to have a big art show in April 4th, but we're going to move that to fall. And then in early April, around April 4th, I'll be putting up those presentation that was put together by Moritz Kundig and a whole group of people in the church that will deal with some future concepts that we could have later on. We know that we can't afford them now. We're not trying to say, let's build it. We just wanted to get some excitement in the church and get those up for people to see rather than have them sitting in a basement. So anyway, I wanted to give you a heads up that they'll be coming up around April 4th. And I'll put some information there that says that we don't expect to be building anything now, but this is what we could do if we have over 400 people, that kind of thing. So
You might,
Dan,
I was going to say, you might consider an article in the Sun, some kind of a mention in the Sun. You can
Right.
submit that on the form that we have, that was a link to a form to submit information, or you could talk with Rebecca whether they could do it without that form being needed. Sue, you had a comment.
yes, that brought up a couple of things for me, Dan. Who is on the aesthetics team now? And do you know our membership, maybe this is something Lynn might know, our membership total right now?
It's 300 and something. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's below what we need because we've lost some major donors. Um, let's see, what was your other question?
Who's on the aesthetic team now?
Okay, basically Lila Gerwin is gone, so it's myself and Gene Larson are on it. You have been on it, as I understand.
Oh, I have not. Jean
You're on
asked me
it?
recently if I wanted to be on it, but I'm on too many things, so I said no.
We're kind of short of people on it, so Jane and I are kind of carrying the load on it.
That would be a very good place, in my opinion, to maybe ask someone who's newer to the church that, you know,
Love to.
could do something like that and get them involved that way.
And if anybody has an idea of somebody with that interest and skill set, we'd be very open to doing that.
I think that that's another item that you could put into the Sun, asking if there's anybody that has interests in that area.
Sure.
This is our communication tool, so we should need to use it the best we can.
I know that.
Yeah, and the membership, somebody, did you say 300 plus, Dan?
I don't know what it is now, but I believe it is, isn't it? Does anybody know? The board should know.
We don't know because it's a kind of a floating term that it gets redefined before we have each annual meeting. So I don't know. Do we know the number of pledged units? Is that something that you've heard discussed, Lynn?
Oh, well, the number of pledging units is different than the number of members by far. I think we have like 168 pledging units, something like that, right? But that's couples and families
Yeah.
and all of that. So as far as members, I don't know the number for that either. Also, pledging units are also friends, not
Yeah.
members. So we'll get the actual number of voting members before the annual meeting, of course.
Right.
But I don't believe it's 300 anymore. That's just an estimate guess, but
Yeah.
pretty darn close probably.
So when's the annual meeting again? Remind me.
June 8th.
June 8th.
It's a Sunday. We chose that to avoid Father's Day, so it's not on Father's Day. And it's at about 12:30. I think that'll be the official time when the notice comes out.
Mhm.
Okay, and that's been in the Sun regularly in 3 or 4 announcements in the last several Suns. Okay, the next item to go to Cindy. You communicated with Rebecca. Maybe just summarize what that was.
Yeah, it was just to forward the January meetings that we had approved. That's the only communication I've had this month.
Okay. Then the next thing is the ops team report from Luba. You did submit a written report. Why don't you read that into the record so that our visitors, and by the way, our visitors are Dan Ekert and Lynn Janician.
Administration is expecting the last numbers on the insurance policy pretty soon. I'm not sure whether they have received or not, but they were expecting soon. Rebecca stressed the importance of having contingency funds in place with expectation of minor increase on maintenance. The church operates on the same skinny budget as before. Last year, a big heater was replaced. This year, the purchase of a new stove and the refrigerator has been put on hold for a while. And it's because everything is so expensive. Not only the purchase, but also the removal. And that is why the team is trying to get a better deal to save the money. The money was saved with a new copier and printer contract, estimate about 2,400 per year. The biggest revenue for the year generosity campaign will be in April, with kickoff on April 6th. That's the phrase of Rebecca, with a formal luncheon and a theme suggested by Lynn Janishan, what brings us here. Since the coffee cart is no longer taking place, redoing of the foyer has begun, and the pastoral care team needs more funds. And this is just from personally from me. We've seen so many people passing. It's evident that, well, the team puts much out of their pockets for memorial services. Next, we need more volunteers to step up in raising some money. New ideas for fundraising are welcome, but it is necessary to know who's going to implement the ideas. Creating a new team, that was a separate issue. When a new team is created or being suggested, the people need to clarify its purpose as well as a long-term commitment. For example, that's the newly organized support team is currently going through a trial period. If the group continues to grow, it will become official. What Rebecca emphasized is sometimes teams may have issues with planning. Then they should consult Rebecca to know what the procedures are. And individual fundraising, like asking chosen individuals instead of giving everyone a chance to donate, is discouraged. That's it.
Ah, okay, because there was something on that last remark about being approached individually. I was approached individually for something, and I wondered how that was felt about doing that. Okay, so now I
That's
know it's discouraged. Okay.
discouraged, yes.
A couple of things. One is following up on Sue. How is that kind of a message to get out to the rest of the people who may be unknowingly or unwittingly or unintendingly not complying with that kind of thing? If it's the ops team with no visitors and no publication, that kind of concerns me, that, you know, these kind of rules are being set down or reiterated or whatever, but there's no kind of a notice to everybody about that. So I don't know whether the board would want to ask that question or whether it's going to happen. Did you hear any comment about how that's going to be conveyed to people?
No,
Okay,
Can Luba ask Rebecca, as she is a contact with that for us as the board? We're wondering how, because I know I was like, oh, this can be done. And it wasn't a large amount, but it just was a surprise to me.
well, okay, this is where we get into this thing. It was clarified in a couple of meetings ago that Luba is to sit in on the liaison, as a liaison, sit in on the ops team and report to us what they've done. And that's what she's been doing. And then as far as her being someone to go from the board to the ops team, that was not the way we were going to do it. If the board had something they wanted to officially convey to the ops team, that was to be by way of some kind of official board action and be conveyed by the secretary, and which would be
Well,
Cindy.
this is a simple clarification for us. Can't it be a simple, somebody asked if she can't the board president ask because it is a concern. I understand what you say, Tom.
Well,
It's one thing to say it in a meeting that not many people attend, but
yeah, well, and then to tandem on that, my other comment about what I just heard from Luba was we're in need of a refrigerator and a stove, and it's been put off. The question comes to my mind, is this something that the ops team needs to think about whether or not we need to have a small capital fund drive in order to do a special collection for those things? And I would think that would be something that they would have contemplated. Was there any contemplation of that, Luba? About a special fund?
No, there was no contemplation about that, but the contemplation was about, the initiative and is specifically a new person in the church realizing that that was not enough money for that lunch for the annual meeting, and that Rebecca cannot allocate any more money or tell them what to do. So the idea came up, okay, if what if we ask some of the members of the church, and of course, who do we know better? Or the ones that we see more often in the church, or the ones that we communicate more often, and so on. And that was just innocent idea. At first, I looked at that idea as, well, maybe that is the way out of the situation when the people want to make a really good lunch for the annual dinner. But Rebecca said that that puts a precedent that is not good. Well, on the one hand, the other people who haven't been asked may be left out. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the people who are asked, some of them feel kind of uncomfortable to refuse. So this is something that was a very touchy subject, and that's how I understood it.
Okay, that goes back to the same issue that Sue raised and that I raised. When they have these kind of precedences and various things stated in the ops team is how does it get out to the public? But my question to you directly was when they discussed the refrigerator and the stove, was there any thought given to whether or not a special fund drive could be organized?
I haven't heard specifically about that, but there was an idea that once we want something, that would be for the whole members of the church and the friends if we want the fund drive.
Yeah, well, we've had special fund drives in the past. It's just a question about whether that's a way to get the money in, before we have both a failed refrigerator and a failed stove.
Yeah.
But that's up to the ops team. If they think that's going to happen, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So we can put down here under new business, whether or not the board wants to inquire or figure out how, if anything, to convey to the rest of the congregation some of these things that just came up in that ops.
no, I don't think that's for the board to take on.
Yeah.
That's just to bring a question to the ops team, and the ops team will handle it. Am I misunderstanding that?
Well, I think it's an ops team deal, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
so
it
I
is.
think a couple of questions to the ops team is the answer, and they can answer ours, and that I think it can be very simple, is what I guess I'm saying.
It sounds very simple, but all I can say is, I'm trying to say this politely.
To me?
Tom,
I
it
no,
is really
I
simple.
get a
Right.
bunch of crap if I try to deal directly with Rebecca. Period. End of statement.
Well, I would be happy to, or,
Can I-
I mean, it just seemed like
Let-
Luke was
Liz.
the person to do this.
I'm happy to fill you in on what I know from this.
Thank you.
Yes, it is an operation. There is an operations team internal policy of how a team goes about doing any sort of a fundraiser. And what happened is a person who was on that team um, sort of went rogue and learned that that's not the way we do things. So that's really all that needs to be said. Um, it's not going to happen again with that. And I don't know that necessarily it's ever been an issue before that teams typically know if they want to do a fundraiser that they have to go about that a certain way. And that is true for the social activities team. This was one individual from that team where the
Trying to do a good thing,
trying to
but
do a
not
good
knowing.
thing
Mhm.
and just not knowing.
Yeah,
And so that's been dealt with, and there is a policy already in place, and which is exactly what we do when an issue comes up. We go to our policies, right, and we say, oh, we already have a policy for this. So I hate to have a big announcement made when something just sort of individually happened. There's already a policy in place. It's not a huge deal. And I don't think we need to make it into one.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay,
Um,
great.
very brief comment to
Yeah.
Lynn, regarding the pledge drive. I wonder if we might not, put the pledge drive together with these capital issues, the stove and the refrigerator, and suggest to people, yes, we want your pledge, you know, think of what your pledge might be. And then would you be willing to reach a little deeper in your pocket to designate a one-time amount for the capital funds? Just a thought of how it might be presented or packaged, perhaps with the pledge drive. But you may not want to muddy the waters. I don't know.
Well, the generosity campaign doesn't do capital fundraising, so that would be board business. That would be you guys that would do that. So, and the pledge drive is ready to roll. The
Okay.
form is done. All of that is, we are moving, rolling. So
Okay.
that would be a
Okay.
big difference.
No worries.
Okay, I inadvertently skipped over a part of my report that had to do with nominations. And it isn't anything that needs board action, but I did get feedback, from the, endowment team. They all, both Karen Dornsteele and Dick Steele have served 2 full terms, so they have to step back according to the bylaws. They can, if they want to, after the next fiscal year, they can re-engage. So there will be putting forth the name of Dan Egret as a person to be nominated and then go through the election process at our annual meeting. And that will leave the endowment team with 5 persons, including, if I got it right, Mary Giannini, Dan Egret, Shane Grunholz, Mary Giannini, and
Tom Bradabo and myself.
Tom Bradabo, yeah. So that's the way that will do. And that's what I got from Karen Dornsteele by way of how they would like the nominations for the endowment team to come to the annual meeting. Then the other report came from Jan Wingenroth. Luba has set forth herself to run for a 3-year term. Luba is filling out the remaining 2 years of a 3-year term and then has agreed to be a candidate for the 3-year full term. And the other one that came to us was that Nancy Avery has agreed to stand for election for the position that would be vacated by Sue Sturitz, who's just been filling in as an appointment for the remainder of a 3-year term. So that's kind of the nominations situation. Are there any questions about that? Okay. Then, do we have anything from, you, Dick, as, a summary from the way things might be from the treasurer's standpoint? And it's okay if you don't, because I know the records might not be available.
Yeah, well, I think we'll know a lot more after the generosity drive, but my overall feeling is that we're in reasonable shape. It was maybe looking worse a year or two back, but I think the church is on the road to recovery.
When will we have, is there like a quarterly report that would be at the end of March that we might have some information on our status at the end of the quarter for the April meeting?
Let's see, well, that would presumably come out sometime in April.
Yeah, so,
So what April meeting, we mean at the April board meeting?
yeah, not having to do with the generosity drive, but how are we doing, how would we be doing financially? Can we expect that?
I could ask Rebecca to make sure we have it in time for the,
Okay,
but the key thing will be generosity drive. But I think we're better positioned now than maybe we thought in a year or two in past. So we're not home free at all. I mean,
no,
still behind and struggling, but I think things are, are starting to look up somewhat anyway. And not just in our church, but other churches too seem to be reviving somewhat now. And I think I think attendance is up and things like that. So there are some good signs, but it hasn't translated into the budget increases we'd like, but we may be positioned to do some improvements.
okay, we'll see how that goes, and as all of us know, I think, the generosity drive supposedly ends on the 30th of April, but there's always some follow-up that goes on, I don't know, for a week or two, and I don't know at what point they decide to have, whether we need a budget summit too. So that all will shake out here in the future. The next item on the agenda then, under new business, is coming again from the endowment team. There's been discussion and I'll give you a little bit of background. You got some background from me by way of email text, but to summarize, there's been discussion that apparently never reached Rebecca. No explanation about why or what's wrong or who dropped the ball, but the possibility of having a statement on our generosity pledge drive paperwork that would have people acknowledge that if they died during the fiscal year that they would be making a pledge for, and it also made an endowment a bequest in their estate documents that they would acknowledge that part of their endowment bequest would go to pay off their unpaid pledge. So the endowment team worked on that, and I just got an email from from Karen that reads that the one they're recommending to Rebecca to be included on that generosity thing reads as follows: a statement that would say, if during the coming fiscal year, I or we have not only made this pledge, but have also made a bequest to the UUC Endowment Fund, or generally through our estate documents, and I or we die, leaving part of that pledge unpaid, I or we authorize a church representative to contact my or our personal representative to ensure that my or our pledge is covered before any of the bequest goes to the endowment fund in accordance with the UCCS bylaws. And the bylaws pretty basically cover that. And that's what was recommended. Now, they did get a response immediately back from Rebecca saying, this I'm reading it again. So the pledge form's already completed and published, so it can't be changed for this year. I'm also not entirely sure that we should be requiring or obligating church members to fulfill their pledge post-mortem if they happen to pass away during a fiscal year when they have a pledge in place. This may deter some people from pledging at all. Just a thought to consider. And that was addressed to the endowment to Karen Dornsteele, Mary Giannini, and Sue Sturts with a copy to me. So we can't do anything like that this year because the forms are already published and all made. What'll happen next year? I guess the endowment team and Rebecca are going to have to sort that out. So that's kind of an update on that.
Tom?
Any questions? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think that is not Rebecca's decision, that's the board decision. And I thought we made a decision on that, which I thought was well considered.
Well, what we did was say that it's really in the bylaws, it's written that way, but does that pledge form need to have something? And we kicked that ball to the endowment team to actually deal with the minutia of how to do that. And that's been going on for several months, as I understand. Now, there is a motion that we were encouraged, particularly by Mary Giannini, who is, of course, an attorney, and she felt that the board should state something about that in support of something like that. So I had drafted a motion which she approved of. I'm just trying to find that motion right now. That we should be able to do that. No, I can't find my own motion. Where did that go?
Can I speak, please?
Well,
Related
oh,
to-
okay, speak, and then I'm gonna have to ask. Oh, no, I did find my motion, but go ahead, Lynn, and address what you have on your mind.
Well, so I'm wondering where this is coming from. I know I've been to every board meeting and maybe missed one, but I think this is one of those solutions in search of a problem. So our generosity form has never had a legal obligation attached to it. Never had that. Our bylaws have a very clear indication of what happens when any money comes in to the office for where it goes or how it goes. No one can be held legally accountable, nor should we be saying anything related to legal obligations on a form that's already complicated for some people to fully understand. We really want the word pledge to be referred to as a promise. This is my promise for the next year, what I will be giving to the church. Whether or not somebody passes away within that year is an issue for a very small number of people. We've never had a problem with where funds go if they are supposed to go to the endowment fund or if they are supposed to fulfill a pledge. We have had one time where a family member checked in to see, and that was a person who needed, spoke to Todd actually, and Todd said it would be great if we could get that pledge fulfilled. This is literally a solution in search of a problem. The bylaws are very, very clear. And if you put legal terminology on a pledge form, you will have a lot of concerned or confused people. I think you can definitely have multiple opportunities for endowment team members to talk to people who want to ask questions about what's going to happen with their estate, or whatever they're planning to do. But to put that on a pledge form is going to confuse a lot of people, or actually concern some
I
people.
have, yeah. Can I ask you a question, Lynn?
Sure, of course.
I, so if I give $50,000 to the church and in my will,
Yeah.
but I haven't specified where it's to go, then the way our bylaws read, this is a question, the way our bylaws read, that $50,000 would go to the endowment team, where I've made a $20,000 pledge. Is this where we don't have anything in the bylaws like this statement would cover? And I understand what you're saying about sounding legal and worrying people. I think you've got a valid concern there. But how do have we just been lucky that we contact Joe's family and say, you know, your dad has an outstanding pledge? Could we take that from the $50,000? Or is that kind of how we're doing it right now through Todd or something?
So it's happened. It doesn't. We just don't have that kind of population, right? It's. I can't really. I mean, it's not something we have precedence for. Like we don't have this happening 30 times a year or something like that. In the history of our church, I only know of it happening one time. If the board does not think that the bylaws give the office or themselves enough understanding of what it's super clear to me, and I'm not really sure how this how it's not really clear. But if it's not clear to somebody on the board or the whole board, then you should look at those bylaws and change the bylaws, not the pledge form. Because there's nothing on the pledge form that we would go back to and say it to anyone after they've passed. Well, we've got this pledge form, right? And typically estates take many months, if not years, to settle. So pledges that need to be fulfilled would not typically happen within that particular pledge year anyway. So it's such a rare circumstance that to put any sort of thing like that on a pledge form is incredibly dissuasive, I would say. But
Okay.
if the bylaws are not clear to you, I think you all should discuss the bylaws and change what you think is necessary. It's not unclear to the office. I'm positive of that.
No, but
And it's not unclear.
it is unclear to the office because without mentioning the name of somebody who died, it was handled inappropriately and in contrast and contrary to just exactly what you said, never happens. It did happen. And it isn't, the endowment team's the one that is trying to make this happen. And I don't see it as being in the board's hands other than to, as was suggested, that the board support the intent of the endowment team to make this happen. That would be the motion that I have, that I am prepared to read. Now, we can have some discussion. I see the hand there from Dick, but
Yeah. I wasn't thinking of that being a legal thing that would go into a pledge form, but I was thinking it would be like a policy. And should that policy go into the bylaws, or do we have a policy document?
We have a bylaw.
we have it.
I mean,
The bylaws, the
is that
bylaws are
appropriate?
clear. The bylaws are clear, Dick, and a policy isn't as powerful as a bylaw. The bylaws are clear. the intent of what the endowment team seems to be doing is to make sure that people who have made a pledge and people who've made a bequest in their estate documents are somehow notified that this is the way things would be handled and they are acknowledging it. And if they don't want to acknowledge it, then
Yeah.
that's another issue to be dealt with.
Yeah, but that seems to me more of a policy than a bylaws issue, though. That's all I can say.
Well, it's in the bylaws.
Okay, yeah.
How about we leave it that you've brought this up at our meeting, and I, being on the endowment team, will take Lynn's message back and they can discuss further.
And I'd like to make a comment too. If somebody defines what where they want it to go, if they want it to go to the endowment team and has that in the documentary, that's going there for sure. And if the other issues, I think Sue and I could talk about that in the endowment meeting and get Mary Jean Annie involved to see if there's any particular aspect that might be legal that we need to review, and also to review our bylaws on that. But I do know that if you want people to give for in perpetuity some of their money that they are leaving to the church, that goes, and they document that, then that goes to the endowment team and it goes to the Seattle Fund.
Well, all I can say is that Mary Giannini was involved in all the discussions that I either sat in on or received communications. And she's the one who basically drafted the statement. It was slightly tweaked to include I and we, that kind of thing. So if the board, and I guess I need to put my motion on the floor and it can be defeated or approved. The endowment team has transferred this to Rebecca as of an email today that represented the agreement of the 5 people who were in the last endowment team meeting. So I move the quote, the UUCS Board of Trustees supports the endowment team's effort to permanently establish some manner of intent/obligation on the annual generosity pledge forms to ensure that an annual member or friend pledge will be fulfilled by diversion to the general fund of any endowment fund bequest in the event of the death of the member or friend, unquote. That is the
I think
motion
you
that
ought to,
we
I
talked
think you ought to get Mary on this board meeting and cover that.
We
before you
need to
vote
have,
on
we
this.
need to have a second or the motion dies for lack of a second. Okay, the motion dies for lack of a second. So what does the board want to do? I can tell you, Dan, that Mary has been involved in this all the way along. So if you want to kick it back to the endowment team, then let's have a motion to do that.
Again, I'd like to see that policy of the endowment team. You know, I don't see, you know, if they had it written down as this is sort of the normal thing that we offer to our pledgees, and they can change it any way they want to, but this is the default, for example. If we don't have any other directions, this is the default procedure, and that's our
endowment
policy.
team.
That would be the policy. That's to me the way that makes sense. If the endowment team, because you may have a future endowment team that doesn't, if it's not written down, doesn't know what the policy has been. So if it's just written down, this is normally what we do. Here's the default, but actual pledging.
Bylaw. It's all in the bylaws.
It's all in the bylaws, and the endowment team has internal policies, and I think if you ask the endowment team, they would not want to put that in their policies because it's already addressed in the bylaws.
Right. Right. If the bylaws are not clear, fix the bylaws.
And I had suggested that at one point, and it was set aside and said that we have other ways to deal with it, and that's when the idea of putting something on the pledge form came up. That happened probably 6 or 7 months ago.
But not in a board meeting, because I've been at the
No,
board meeting.
in an endowment meeting.
In the endowment meeting and at the Legacy Society.
Well, could you show us what the bylaws actually say?
I,
I'm- Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's in the bylaws right now. That would take probably a half an hour. I can't even screen share to show that to you.
Why isn't it issued at all if it's already resolved in the bylaws? I mean,
Well,
understand that.
the issue came, all I'm trying to tell you guys, the issue came from the endowment fund.
Okay.
And I just got a notice that there's an email from Mary Giannini, which I could check and read, but okay, the motion failed. So does the board want to leave it alone, or does the board want to kick something back to the endowment fund? If you do, then you got to do it by way of something, some clear direction. And I would suggest by some kind of a motion so that there's agreement that we all, or that at least a majority of us agreed.
Mhm.
You know, since this can't be dealt with for this pledge cycle, maybe we just let it sit for a while and see if it's something that really does need to be addressed.
Yes, I agree with that. And then I can take it, Dan and I can take it back to the team and let them know, and we can rediscuss it. So there's no rush.
Well, can we consider, could I kind of state a motion that the board wishes this issue to go back to the endowment team for further consideration?
Second that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, the motion is that the board wishes this matter go back to the endowment team for further consideration.
Mhm.
It's been seconded. Those in favor indicate by show of that. And we have a unanimous vote to, for you lack of a better term, to kick the can back to the endowment team.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay? And the next item on the agenda is, find my loading agenda here amongst all that paperwork. Okay, this is item 12.2. This gets into this item issue of a treasurer. The suggestion has come forth that recognize that it's awkward to just find a board member who happens to have the wherewithal to be a treasurer, and this puts, like, the burden is put on Dick with some financial background, but is really not in a position to be like an official treasurer, but the board, according to state law, needs to have a treasurer on its board. So the idea has come forward about having the board appoint a non-voting ex officio trustee to be the treasurer. And then, being a trustee, we'd satisfy the state law. Being appointed and non-voting wouldn't change the quorum of the board. We'd still have a 7-member board. Think of it in terms of Todd, the senior minister, is ex officio member of the board, but non-voting. So that would take, if that concept is something we'd like to look at, it would take a bylaw change, because we describe a treasurer in there, we'd have to change some wording, and that could be worked out probably in enough time to actually get to the annual meeting. So, may I mention that somebody has stepped forward who would be willing to fill that ex officio non-voting position?
Yes. Are you
Somebody
asking me?
Somebody has, my goodness. Would that person, if they're available in this meeting, speak up?
Oh my God, it sounds like, what's my line?
It does. So, yes, absolutely. I'll speak up, but can I just add a couple of other things? So, this is the way it has actually always been done, guys. But We just didn't realize it when we rewrote the bylaws. Thought, and the ultimate goal is to have a consistent treasurer of the church for as long as that person is willing to be the treasurer of the church. So you can still have a 7-member board of trustees who are elected and another person or 5-member or whatever. I think we're going to talk about that too, but whatever the number is. And the ex officio treasurer has to be an ex officio. That's why you have an ex officio board member, right? So to fulfill the needs of the state, the law basically, you just would have the same person acting in that role. They don't necessarily always come to the board meetings, and that's been true in the past. We've always had a church treasurer. According to the office and the state, that person has always been a board member. They just weren't elected by the congregation. And probably most members of the congregation just had no idea that that's the way it was always written in, because it had to be. So when Grant was the treasurer of our church, he was a board member according to the state, but not according to our church,
Yeah,
because they just didn't know that he was an ex officio.
Just, I agree with what Lynn has said. It's very productive. The only little bit that I would add on to it, in my experience, going back a lot of years, well over half a century, to my knowledge, there was never an official action of appointing the treasurer to be a trustee. We had an appointed treasurer, but it wasn't like a trustee, because until we redid the bylaws 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't aware that we had to have a trustee as a treasurer. So this solves both problems. And if the
Yeah.
board would like to approve this in concept, then with a motion, then I and 1 or 2 others can look at how would we tweak the bylaws.
And then when we do that, Lynn could just be appointed for starting next year.
Yeah, yeah. And just to speak on, Lynn's behalf, Lynn you've been the treasurer of NAUA, have you not?
Correct.
Right. So you've been in this position looking at, profit and loss statements and checking accounts and income and outgoes and all that sort of stuff. So this is something that you'd be familiar with. And if we were looking for somebody, this would be certainly somebody we would highly consider. At least I would.
You could consider somebody else if you want to.
So far, that's not been very productive with finding
Right.
it.
Quick comment, Tom.
Yeah.
I just, again, I've had a lot of years too, and unfortunately, we don't have the rich number. We had a rich number of CPAs in the past to choose from. Now we have none. So I really credit Len for standing in there, but if somebody joins the church that really has some heavy duty qualifications as treasurer, we certainly ought to grab them and relieve her and so on. I applaud her for taking that on because, yeah,
It's not
my comment.
it's not as complicated at the church as it is actually in AUA, because we have a bookkeeper.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we have
I
a
know.
bookkeeper and an
But-
office manager.
But we need auditing and so on, really. We need auditing, we really need double checking, and that's what it's
Well,
about.
don't you have double checking in a sense with the Lynn's position? Lynn, the bookkeeper, to Lynn, is that double checking in any way?
Well, she is probably the first check. I mean, there's Rebecca, there's Lynn, and me.
Okay, I'm in
And
favor
the
of.
finance team, the people on the finance team.
Yes. Now, are there 2 people with Donna passing?
Right. Well, Dick and Bill.
Oh, okay, okay,
The finance team that's another issue. That isn't the issue.
yeah,
So,
okay.
I would move, and as the chairman of a small board, I'm allowed to do that. I would move that we approve the concept of appointing a non-voting ex officio person to be a trustee and work on preparation of bylaws for the annual meeting.
I second it.
Mhm.
Okay, any further discussion? Dick?
Yeah, I think my understanding, that the reason the state requires a separate treasurer is that they don't want the president to be the treasurer also, and they want, they want a financial check to make sure there's no hanky-panky. And if they have a president and treasurer separate people, then there's less chance of somebody at the top walking off with a lot of money and not having any oversight and that kind of thing. I think that's the state's basic motivation.
Well,
And
yeah.
so with this handle that, my own concern is the non-voting situation. If there were a problem of like with the president causing trouble or something, I don't think it would be in a church, but these are corporate bylaws, you know. Then you need a treasurer with enough power to really counter any hanky-panky like that. So I'm not sure how that would work, but I think that's where the state's coming from, because these are standard corporate bylaws. They're not designed for churches. And that's what's going on.
Well, I would, in kind of agreeing with you that it would be the responsibility of the treasurer to identify, to notify the board, if not the whole church, that there's something hanky-panky going on, and that's what that purpose would be served. So, yeah. So
In practice, it might be the
I have
treasurer
made
might
a,
be the
I have made
treasurer
a
might be the
motion
one.
and it's been seconded, so continue your discussion, Dick, and then
Yeah,
we can move to a vote.
Yeah, I think like an important role of the treasurer might be, or this viewpoint would be to recommend the need for an audit or something like that. You know, that's how it might work out in practice.
Absolutely. Okay, those did you have a comment, Justin, or were you going to vote? You're muted.
Muted, Justin, we cannot hear you.
Still not hearing you, Justin.
You're still muted, Justin.
Yeah, he knows that. He's trying to figure out how to do it.
Okay.
Maybe he could type it in comments.
Well, if it has to pertain with commentary on the item before us to vote, is it something you need to put in the chat, Justin, with regard to this vote?
Okay, am I, you
Yeah,
hear me now?
yeah, yeah, good.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I would just like to clarify how the auditing is done. To audit, you have to have something you can check against something else to make sure the two accounts balance. How is this auditing process performed?
We don't have an auditing process, as I understand it, and haven't had for some time. Does
No,
anyone
that's
know anything different?
that's the part that concerns me. I just auditing requires you compare something like the bank records against the bookkeeper's records, or um, things of that nature. Somehow you have to check something against something. I was hoping to clarify that before we voted.
I don't think that we can clarify that.
Okay, all right, I'll drop it for now and we'll go ahead with the vote.
Yeah, it's something that, again, is kind of in the operations mode and not the board policy thing. Right now, we're talking about, do we want to go ahead with this concept and try to prepare to the bylaw amendment to bring it to the annual meeting. So with those in favor, please indicate with a raised hand. We have a unanimous, we have the unanimous to go ahead with the motion, and I think that Marilyn will be able to pick it up from the recording. Okay, then the next item, which is another thing having to do with the trustees, and that's, do we really need 7 trustees as opposed to having 5? I checked with Mary Giannini, who checked with the state law, and she said we could actually have as few as 3. So, you know, for those who don't know, before we went to policy government, we were a board of 9. That was reduced to 7. And Nancy Avery told me she was on the board when that happened. A few years ago, we dropped the nominating team from 5 to 3 because the team thought we don't need 5. 3 of us can do this job. And besides that, it would free up 2 more people to possibly serve in some capacity in the church. So this concept, which has been brought to my attention, is something we should consider. And that's what I kind of want to have a discussion about. And if there seems to be something favorable enough to make a motion to do it, that would also take a bylaw change. We can talk about the mechanics of how that would take place. Also, if that's an issue, we can figure it out. There are ways to do that, to drop, you know, the number from 7 to 5. There are ways to do that. But open discussion, the concept of going from 7 to 5. Cindy?
Does it have to be a stable number that doesn't vary from year to year?
Well, it's set forth in the bylaws, so you couldn't, once you set, like we have it now as 7 in the bylaws, and we describe how starting in 2020, we were going to rotate the positions, you know, so many in an odd number year and so many in an even number year. So we'd have to, every year that if we wanted to change that, we'd have to change bylaws every year.
Mm-hmm. Could the bylaws be like, no fewer than 3, no more than 7?
Yeah, I've seen bylaws like that, yes.
Boy, that's a good question.
So in theory, according to the state, that would be possible.
Yeah, the problem that I would see would be in trying to keep track of the terms. We have 3-year terms. And how would we keep track of the terms and of the positions, really, rather than thinking of people, think of positions? I would think it would be difficult to do that, although if what Dick says is true, it must not be impossible. But I certainly don't know how it would be.
Just curious, I don't know if that would be an advantage or disadvantage, just a thought.
Mhm.
Anybody respond to that about having a flexible number, for lack of a better term, versus a fixed number?
I think it would
Flexible is better.
Um, Lynn,
I'm so sorry. Sorry, Luba.
Oh, no, it's okay. We just simultaneously started opening the mouth.
I know, but you're the board member.
yeah, we defer to the board members on the first.
Okay, flexible seems to be better because life goes on, people die, and that's flexibility.
Well, we have a means to appoint to fill a position. Sue filled a position from a resignation. I think that was it. Yeah.
I don't remember. But
Yeah.
you know, that is a good example. If you had that flexibility and you couldn't find someone like me that said I'd fill this short term, if you had something that said no more than 7, no less than 5, then that gives the board that flexibility without filling that position if they can't find anyone.
Mhm.
I'm feeling better about the flexible number than I am about a fixed number right now. I'd like to hear more if anybody has any more to say.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I tend to think the same way Sue does, that I like the idea of flexible.
Mhm.
Well, one possible flexible way, the endowment team, in fact, there is a minimum of 5, and they've had as many as 7, and um, right now they have 5, but
Mhm.
they meet the minimum requirement of the numbers. We would have to set up, since I have no concept or no notion about how you would set up bylaws to define your board with a flexible.
How is it
We
being
would have to
done?
we would have to have a committee to explore that.
Well, start with how the endowment team did it. Their wording right there. And then I know Karen has kept track, and I don't know how it was done prior to this, but she's got a chart and she can tell everybody, okay, this is your last year, in 2 years, this is yours. And somebody has kept that going apparently.
Well, Dick has kept it going, and he was the one who originated the trustees one, and then he showed me how to convert it so that I could do it, and I've been doing that, but I've always been sending him a draft to make sure he agrees with it.
Mhm.
So yeah, you can do it. And I'm not sure how they do it with a floating number. That would be something to explore with Dick, whether he has some idea of doing that. So we
Well,
could,
I would be happy to explore the wording, starting with how it's done with the endowment team. If this is what we decided to do, to have the flexible, I would be happy to explore that with you for a bylaw change, Tom.
well, why, if everybody is in agreement, why don't you explore that? I would just like to see that as an alternative to having an absolute number of 5, because I know how that would work. And or staying with 7. You know, we haven't talked about if you have fewer board members to take on any tasks that come before the board, then does that make it kind of onerous for someone to think about being on a board if they realize that there are not 7 people to spread the workload around, but only 5, and therefore, you know, you can see where I'm going with that. Nobody's mentioned that, but that did occur to me.
I've thought on that is, I think, like if you're talking about between 5 and 7, that normally you would aim for the 7, but yeah, if someone has to resign or leave or dies, then you might have some flexibility as to you fill it right now or wait for the next annual meeting, something like that.
Well, we define that in the bylaws, so to speak. And there was one session when one of the boards, maybe you were on the board, Lynn, you went for almost 9 or 10 months with only 6 board members.
We went a whole year, the first year when Dick was president, because Catherine Alexander resigned when we were all
Oh,
first
that's right.
elected. And we didn't appoint somebody. So, and you don't have, I mean, it doesn't say you have to have this number if you start with that number. I mean, sometimes you just can't replace somebody.
Mhm.
But I do think it would be relatively simple to fix a chart like that. People would know I'm in this position. I know I'm on a 3-year term, and I don't see how that would be too complicated to figure out. I do think it's a really good idea not to go below 5. I think 5 is a really good number. 3 is, I mean, if somebody's sick,
Yeah.
you're not going to have a quorum very often if somebody doesn't show up, or, you know,
Mhm.
that's an issue. But
And I
Yeah.
like having a minimum of 5 to get a discussion about something and more thoughts. How many times do we discuss things? And I get to hear, like we are right now, I get to hear, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that. And so the
well,
minimum of 5.
and you've already got 7 people for this upcoming year. So to change the bylaw to be 5 to 7, it gives you another whole year to maybe just have 5. And, you know, it is hard to find people who are willing to serve. it's not an easy thing to go around for the nominating team and find people wanting to do this job. But so finding 5 is a little bit easier than finding 7, although I think it's great to have that flexibility. I think it would be wonderful.
Justin,
Yeah, I have the impression from everything that's taken place that we've had more problems with finding board members than the not having enough board members. So to me, I lean again towards the flexibility because I keep hearing the case that we're having trouble finding board members, but not that we didn't have enough board members. So it seems to me like flexibility is more important than the number.
well, we would want, from the standpoint of realizing how things work, having an even number is pretty awkward, because if you get a split vote, then essentially that's a no for any motion before the board.
Good
So
point.
having odd number 5 or 7 simplifies that issue. When we think about 5, we think about what is a quorum? A quorum would be 3. And we talk about a majority of the board voting on a motion, that would be 3. So that would be 3 people making our decisions instead of 4 people. So if you look at a 7-member board. So is it kind of general agreement to have Sue maybe explore with Dick Steele how the nominating committee has worked with this idea of no less than 5? And with with some kind of, if they have, and they do have apparently flexibility, because it's just the way it's defined in our bylaws, that the nominating team will be at least 5. And then we
So
up
if
to
I
the,
could
left
repeat
it
that,
up to the team.
yeah, if I could repeat that back to you, so I make sure I understand you. To talk with Dick Steele and maybe Karen,
Yeah.
how it's worked for the E-team, and how, I guess I'm not sure what else, basically how it's worked for them to do it that way. Has it presented any problems for them?
Well, yeah, the idea that Sydney put forward was was flexibility, and possibly with at least 5. And how would Dick think that that could work with positions, rather, so that we could keep track of positions?
Board, okay, I can do that.
Because we know how we would do it if we had it fixed at 5, because we know how to appoint, we just change the numbers in the bylaws. And I've already worked with the bylaws, so I kind of have a rough idea of how that would work. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay, we know what Sue's gonna do. What comment do you have, Dan?
Just a quick comment is that you have to think about this. It's not just a matter of filling people on the board. It's ideally you will have different skill sets on members of the board, and I think that is quite important to have somebody with financial background, somebody with management background, and so on. But it's hard to find that kind of mix. So it isn't just a matter of filling the board with people. It's getting people that really can get things done and have the best skill set to do that. So if we can't find enough to meet those 7 requirements with 7 people, then I think your idea of going to 5 makes sense. But if you can, then fine.
So are
Regardless,
you in favor of the flexible, Dan, being 5 the least and 7?
Not sure. Yeah, I think so, but I'm not quite sure on this. It's up to you folks, but I just wanted to make that comment that quality is important too. It's not a matter of just filling.
I'm thinking you're on the board. You're always on the board in my mind. So
well,
thank you.
the question that Dan points out, regardless of whether you have 5 or 7 or 9 or 11, the question of trying to find people that are the best suited people
That's right.
to serve
That's
on a
right.
board is a problem. So, okay, so you're going to do that and you'll report back to the board in our April meeting,
Okay,
okay? All right, the next item, which is kind of discussions that we have been having around before, and that's, do we want to take, as a board, do we want to take any further action to pursue this issue of UUCS, UUA separation, or not get involved with that at the present time? This is a discussion which might lead to some action. Any thoughts from board members first?
okay, I'll speak up. I would just as soon let it, I don't hear anyone concerned about it. I would just as soon leave it for now. That's a simple answer for me.
I see that Linda Green has joined us at 5:25. Hello, Linda. And any other board members?
I move the same opinion as Sue.
Yeah, I think there's not a real strong push for separation now, and the UUA is backing off on a number of things, so yeah, I don't see the need for it right now.
That was prominent in your remarks the last time, pointing out to us that they have backed away from some of the issues in Article 3, in the Article 3 amendment. So maybe if that's on my mind, I'm kind of in the same position that Sue and Luba are, and you appear to be, and that's that for the time being, let's take a pass on it.
Yeah.
We can
Um,
always keep our finger on the pulse of things,
Right.
you
If
know.
something really disastrous happens,
Yeah.
there are different forces within the UUA, and some of them are not too good, but it seems like those not too good forces are not the most prominent ones at the moment. So
Well, the only thing that would be is now in this meeting and in the April meeting, we could do something to prepare to take it to the congregation, because it would be a congregational vote, and it takes 2/3 of those present at a meeting, assuming there's a quorum. So if we pass on it this month and pass on it next month, then it's kind of off the record until the following year's annual meeting, unless we've felt enough of a crisis to have a special congregational meeting.
I have a question for Lynn. That survey that the team did, am I remembering, Lynn, that it was kind of 50-50 how people thought right now at that time?
Well, that, I don't even know that we looked at it as a vote. I mean, because it wasn't,
No, it's just opinions,
it
I
was
think.
more questions, and so I don't have those numbers exactly, like
Mhm.
from a numbers perspective. It was more of a, what are your questions and concerns
Okay.
about leaving?
that one congregational meeting that was on Zoom, I believe, it seemed like it was pretty middling divide, 50-50 division as to whether or not we should do, or just somewhere in the middle. I mean, I didn't see a real strong vote or desire to separate right now. So do other people agree with that?
Well, there were a couple of, there was at least one speaker I thought that was pretty strongly on each end of the yardstick.
Right, yeah, that's what I mean. It's just, it
But
wasn't,
that's all I
I don't think it would pass right now anyway, if you tried to have 2/3, my judgment. And
Justin.
I mean, if they do something really nasty with the bylaws in a few years, but it seems like they're backing off on some of that.
Okay.
I think they're getting, they probably don't want to lose too many more congregations in the UUA or membership, you see.
Justin, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm gonna just kind of restate it, but some military strategy was once upon a time to why take casualties in a battle that appears to be won. If the enemy ain't attacking, I don't want to be the one to start it.
Right.
I'm getting a warning here on my battery. Let me see what's going on. See what's going on. Okay, before I lose the computer here.
Okay, well, the consensus is that we don't do anything
Yeah,
at the present time. Okay, then the next item was, kind of in a similar discussion that they came up together, was whether or not to change the name of UUCS, Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, to some other name. Whether they'll get into that in depth, coming up with alternatives and options, and ultimately bringing it before the congregation. And this is a discussion, action to be taken if necessary or needed.
yeah. I'll start off.
Justin, go for it.
If we're not necessarily going to separate, do we want to change the name? Seemed like when we took the first stance to do little, changing the name to fit a change that ain't gonna happen, doesn't seem to make sense.
Right. I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
There's no impetus or need to change the name now.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the last thing you would do, I think, if there was a real crisis and you want to leave the UUA.
Okay, any board members want to jump in? And then if not, then we can have our guests jump in if they wish.
Yeah, I support the previous opinion.
Okay, so we have three board members. I'm of a similar opinion. We don't have a crisis at this point with UUA, so I would be in favor of just not going anywhere with this. And one of our guests, Linda Green, chimed in, saying she was of a similar opinion. Let's see, Cindy, any?
I agree. I think we don't need to fix things that aren't presently broken.
So any comments? We've heard from all the, do you have a comment, Doug, that you want to jump in on?
Does anybody know whether Todd has an opinion or, any interest in this? Like it might be something he would initiate.
And he could do that because he could call on his own, he could call a congregational meeting. If he
And
felt,
since he's not here, I think we leave that until Todd is present and he can
Yeah.
speak.
anything we'd hear about Todd's opinion would be indirect and possibly hearsay.
Yeah. I do think he does feel more strongly about this, but I don't think he has the backing from the congregation right now. Yeah.
Any comments from you, Dan or Lynn?
No, I see advantages as long as we're paying our pittance to national, and staying with them, to keep it the way it is. Uh,
Okay, well, then, after discussion, the consensus is to do nothing. Okay, the next and the final item on the under old business is this apartheid-free vote. So I'll give you a little information, some of which I may have conveyed to you, some of which is from Nancy Avery. She and I had a discussion about whether, due to the change in politics from when the Social Justice Coordinating Council first asked us to put this on the agenda for the annual meeting to vote to be a signatory, for the congregation to be a signatory, we discussed whether the current political situation might have changed the opinion of the Social Justice Coordinating Council to bring this forth. And Nancy polled the coordinating committee, and they said that they think it needs to be on there. And even the comment that was things is that we need, as John Lewis said, we need to make some good trouble. So they would like to keep it on the agenda, which we have a motion from the last couple of meetings back that we'll know exactly what the motion will be. And they will present a case, and they're also going to, she also said they're going to try to make some effort to educate the congregation about prior to the meeting. Then I asked her, which is something the board could make a decision on, whether the coordinating council had any indication or suggestion about whether we should have a secret ballot vote so that people could vote without feeling as if they might be thought of poorly by someone who had a different opinion. And she hasn't gotten back to me on that. That would be something that we could still do even into April, although I know that Rebecca would like to have as much notice of that as possible, because we'd clearly have to have written ballots, and then we'd have to wait to handle a Zoom vote that would be a private vote. So
I
we
would
could-
recommend, I would recommend.
We could have a discussion about it and not take any actual action if we want to. The first hand I saw was Sue and then Dick.
Mhm.
You know, when you first brought this up last month, I thought, well, okay, let's just do it. And since then, I have read articles that really opened my eyes to some possibilities of retaliation, danger, or whatever. And I thought, whoa, wow, I just hadn't thought about that. So I'm not real educated on that, but it did make me take pause as to just say, yeah, let's do it. So I do. I'd like to hear more talk. I would really like to have some education on this, of what it could mean to the church as a whole. Um, so that's just kind of my initial thoughts.
Okay, Dick.
Yeah, I would recommend a secret ballot and this kind of thing, and a thorough discussion. And yeah, this, I can see Trump trying to retaliate, but we're pretty small potatoes. And I don't think we have, and we have separation of church and state.
Kinda.
So kind of, but I don't think, we're not a big target, put it that way. And
Yeah.
Trump likes to go for big targets, and then he'll back off if you resist. The biggest issue is if somehow we got caught up in something really bigger that he targeted, and we'd have to join some lawsuit that would cost us some money. That's conceivable. I'm sure we would win, but conceivably there would be some kind of lawsuit we'd have to deal with.
Any other comments along the lines of, and we have to put it on the ballot in the annual meeting because our policy 5 said if a recognized team presents the board with the intent to have a motion, it has to go to the congregation. So the only real question is secret ballot or not.
It's a good idea.
I would just really add my voice to the idea of more education on the topic in general, and secondarily, what it would mean for the role of our congregation.
Yeah, right. And we assume that if this was a motion on the floor in the congregation, the annual meeting, there would be some possibly pretty heated discussion about just that. What would happen to the whole church if the US Justice Department decided to make an example out of this?
Mhm.
Wild thought.
Well, and these were individuals in the article that I read. Wasn't the government coming after, which you're going to have in any stance that you take. So just as long as we recognize this could be a very important, sensitive, that's kind of part of the education part. But as to the question being asked, I would go for a secret ballot.
Yeah. Well, I suspect that's what they're gonna come back with. Nancy's personal opinion was yes, but she said, let me talk to the others, and then she hasn't gotten back to me yet. But, you know, in this meeting, the comments gotta come up. We're already not in great favor with our Jewish friends in the community because of some other things that we have done as a congregation. So is this going to create something internal, not internally, but here in our local community that the congregation may want to not get into. But that'll be up to the congregation in a discussion, before everybody.
And I ought like to comment on that too. A lot may depend on what kind of Jewish community. There's some, there are conservative Jewish groups which might be going along with what's happening in Israel. But there are lots of reformist groups too. Like in Seattle, the Saltwater Church in Des Moines I go to shares their building with a Jewish congregation, smaller congregation. And I've talked to some of the activist members there, and they don't go along with this Zionism. And we have a very strong Jewish Voices for Peace presence in Seattle, and they're as critical of what Netanyahu is doing as a lot of other people. And at the University of Washington, I've talked to some of the student leaders and the protests against what's going on in Gaza, and many of these student leaders were actually Jewish. So don't categorize all the Jewish people as followers of AIPAC.
No, that is true, but we have to deal with the Jewish community here in Spokane.
Right, that's what you have to know more about it than I do. But I
Yeah.
suspect it's probably divided too, because you have the whole Jewish community has, like I live in a neighborhood in Seattle, which has, I think, 2 synagogues, and they're both, I've been told, are more traditional conservative kinds of synagogues. So you see people walking around the neighborhood with Marmalukes on the Saturday and things like that. But then all my contacts have been with Jewish Forces for Peace,
Yeah.
Kadima, and things like that, and we're
Well, I
we're
will.
together with them.
I will convey to Nancy, of course, and there's other people on the committee that there was some sense amongst some of the board members that we need to have some kind of sense of how this, if we were to pass this and signature to it as a congregation, what would be the impact on our local Jewish community and, our relationship. And not that that will be the guiding light, but if we're asking that question, other people are going to want to know that too. Lynn.
I think I really appreciate the thoughtfulness going into this conversation from all of you. And I think that annual meetings are not the best place for the education. I'm wondering if the education could happen before that somehow, so that the congregants coming into that meeting who have not really had time to think things through before they vote could have that opportunity. At least maybe Nancy could lead some sort of a discussion group, or that people could attend.
I kind of thought that's where she was headed when
Oh, good.
when she said we want to educate.
Okay,
So
good.
I will, in my conversation with her, I will emphasize that seems pretty important to us to be educated in advance, which could mean just a congregational conversation like we had, the shared ministry team had, that they, as a coordinating council, could have that meeting, and whoever wanted to attend could attend. Okay.
Justin has a question.
Oh, excuse me. Who?
Justin.
Oh, Justin, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I must admit I have split feelings on this one. With all the stuff going on with this DEI and stuff, I feel like we need to make a stand. On the other hand, I was a member of the security team, and Dan and I were one of the ones who put up a lot of the cameras because we were concerned about radical groups like Boys from Idaho and so on coming through and destroying the church or attacking the members or bus breaking into our services and so on. So I feel myself split. The security person, when he says that we should keep quiet about it, the moral side of me says that I'm sick and tired of all this anti-DEI stuff and picking out people because of their race or religion. So I find myself very split, and I get that sense that many other people in the congregation are very split.
Yeah, and I don't know whether that in itself, whether that would be a part of the conversation about whether we would sign a petition apartheid-free, which does mention among its 4 points specifically the Israeli Pakistani, not Pakistani, but the conflict between Israel and Hamas and the folks that are involved in that. So some people may feel I don't want to get, I would vote for it, but I don't want to get involved in that issue since that's a specific part of the petition. And that will come out in the education process. So now we're getting to the end of the meeting where if this discussion is over, any input from non-board members?
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple comments. First, I don't know about that halo that's sitting over Cindy Fine's head a little while ago.
I see
I
that.
was
There
wondering
it
about
is.
that too.
Yeah, it's pretty strong too. So anyway, a couple of comments as I sit through your meeting here, and I think you run a pretty good meeting, Tom. Kind of move it fast, and I think you got quite a bit done. But just a few thoughts and observations. One that, and you know me, I'm for the future here of this church, and I have not heard anything about, what are our plans, where the strategic plan is. Is this still in effect? And I'll say some more. I just see things kind of sailing along, and I hope that you're really looking hard at where we want to go in this church and how do we set up a plan that says these are the priorities and these other things are minutia that are not priorities. So that's one thing I observed. I didn't hear anything along that line. Another comment would be relative to Dick's comments. Auditing is important. There was a point of time where we had sitting in our accounts here, let's see, I think it was around 700,000 at that time. And there's always, trust is always there, but it needs to be verified, and double signatures are one way to do that. Nobody can write a check without it. And I believe that our minister has to sign off a lot of those things, Dick, but it is important to have somebody like Lynn or even better yet, a CPA kind of reviewing where we're at times and making sure that everything's going along copacetic. And then the last thought I have is I didn't hear anything today, maybe one time where Todd's name came up. And when we talk about the ops team and so on, the ops team has a combination of both people that we have hired as well as members of the church on the ops team. And then there's a liaison there as Luba is. But I want to remind you that our minister really is the one that the member that our employees report to. He is the CEO of the church. And so really when you're talking about the ops team, a big part of that ops team is the CEO. And the board, like most corporations or organizations, is a guiding structure. In this case, they're representing the population of the congregation. But the CEO of the church is involved with running the day-to-day thing of the church. And I know he's out for a sabbatical, but I hope when he's done, I believe it's in July, that you really will welcome him to the board and really make him an active participant in setting up agendas, and so on. Whoever's running the board this next year or so, or whoever's still here, because having him involved in that is a critical function in my mind of a successful church and a successful organization that works together and gets things done. Everybody is happy, and we all have little halos over our head.
Well,
My two bits.
just to address what you said, something that you might not see unless you printed the agenda out is item 16 called items not to be forgotten. Review the ministerial agreement. That's to be done every 3 years. Review the end statements with the membership involvement, possibly with a visioning process in 2025, 26, including the 7 principles and including a strategic plan. So we have that specifically. I added that so we would not let that slip by us. We can't,
Right.
as a board, Robert's rules tell us we can't direct the next board to do things.
Right.
Just like the previous board couldn't direct us, and we had to choose what our priorities were. And when we looked at things that were that we should try to deal with, we put these items off until the next year, which is kicking the can down the road. The other thing is that the executive committee is composed of the senior minister, president, vice president, and one other trustee, and they put together the agenda. And Todd's been involved in all of those exec committee meetings,
Okay.
except for February during a study month, and now this modified sabbatical. He has elected to not participate in that, but it's set up so he is an equal partner in establishing the agenda.
Yeah. Well, it should be. Yeah.
So I just wanted,
And did you say that there is an outline for your strategic plan?
it's on the item as to not be forgotten. In other words, bringing it to the attention of the next board that this is something that should be considered as pretty high priority for them.
But it doesn't exist, right?
Well, there's an old one that I understand was done and then was tweaked, but that's the only thing that I have heard, and I've been out of it. I was RVing for all those years, so I don't really
Yeah.
know.
Okay, well, those are just my thoughts and observations for what they're worth. I'm not on the board, but as a
Yeah.
longtime church member, I'm concerned, and I want to see this church raise and grow and become the best that we can be.
Sure. Lynn and Linda, do you have anything to add? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I was going to mention that, UUJME has things that are available for people to see about the Palestinian and Israeli problem. I don't know that anybody knows what sort of a reaction, what kind of horrible thing might happen to the church if we say, yes, we want them to say this is an apartheid state that they are existing in. So I think that that's just a matter of conjecture that really nobody knows.
I
I
think
don't
you're
know
right.
how you can educate toward that. It's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the things some people might bring up, if they do a good job of educating us, they might look at whether there's any other examples. Or even contacting the committee that has put together this apartheid-free campaign or petition and say, has anybody had anything come down on them? So that'll be a discussion I'll have with Nancy to try to discover those kinds of things, including that. So
Okay.
thank you. Well, a comment from Dick and Lynn. I see hands up
Yeah,
for both.
on that, Gaza thing, I know there are groups in Israel itself, which talk about the apartheid situation there. There's one group I know called Standing Together. It's kind of a liberal, progressive kind of group, which is very, very critical of what Netanyahu is doing
Yeah.
and wants to work with the Palestinians, wants to stop what's going on in the West Bank as well as Gaza. And they're very, very clear that it is a real apartheid state the way it's actually being run now. And so we're not, and so there's an opposition group many opposition groups in Israel that we don't hear about in the U.S. media, put it that way. And of course, they're actively suppressed in Israel itself, but they still manage to survive some way or other. And often like this one, Staying Together, we had one of their people actually came to the tour in the US. That's where I heard about it. And they often survive by having a mixture of different kinds of people, not just being one narrow group of people, but sort of collectives of people from different backgrounds who can work together. That's part of their goals is to break down some of these barriers of apartheid.
Well, hopefully a lot of this will come out, and I will stress to Nancy that they do their very best to get some kind of meetings beforehand that will help answer some of these questions. Lynn, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Tom. That's exactly, I just wanted to reiterate that because it is just so easy to say, well, of course we're apartheid free. Of course we're an apartheid free church without really fully understanding all of the background knowledge. Not everybody has your level of understanding of all of that. So I think it would be so great to have a little bit more understanding.
Well, I will put these thoughts in an email to Nancy, so it's just not a conversation. And I will share that with the other board members, kind of breaking down a little bit about sharing things with the board members. But I think this is something I'd like to share with all of you, that I did convey this to Nancy. So be prepared. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good meeting. Goodbye.
Bye.
You can call me or something, but I've been thinking about getting on your call. Talk a little bit. You don't mind. So, call me on my cell phone. I'll see you later. I will, this is Linda, let me know if you're gonna come to the Greensboro kitchen. Jean is planning to, and I'm planning to.